Hello everyone, today I'll be reviewing The Great Dictator. So The Great Dictator was released in 1940 and is starring Charlie Chaplin, and it was also directed and produced by Chaplin as well. So in this film, Charlie Chaplin, he plays two different characters. He plays a Jewish barber and a dictator known as Hynkel. The film is set in this fictional country called Tomania, and the film starts off towards the end of World War One, so 1918, and Chaplin, as the Jewish barber, is taking part in the war for Tomania, and obviously, being in a lot of Charlie Chaplin films, we get some funny sequences with him hanging in this plane upside down and all this sort of thing. It later ends up that Tomania loses the war. That we suddenly fast forward a few years, and this Jewish barber character, he is living in this ghetto part of Tomania where Jews are being persecuted. And then we go to Chaplin's other character, who is this dictator called Hynkel, who is really ruthless and very controlling over his country of Tomania, and he's wanting to invade other countries and is really becoming out of control, I suppose. Now, this film came out in 1940, as I said, which was obviously during the time of World War II. Although it was still in the early days of World War II, it was actually before America had entered World War II. Obviously, Pearl Harbor wasn't until the following year, 1941. But this film is very much a political satire. It's very much a satire on these ruthless dictators. And obviously, as you might have been to realise, this Hynkel character, this dictator, played by Chaplin, is a parody of Adolf Hitler. It's very obvious when watching this film that it's a parody of Adolf Hitler. So as the film goes on, we later see how this Jewish barber character, and played by Chaplin, obviously, he's been affected by these troopers who are sent around the streets, keeping everything in line and keeping everything under control. Meanwhile, the Jewish barber, he also ends up falling in love with this woman who lives nearby, who's played by Paulette Goddard. Now, Paulette Goddard, she was actually married to Chaplin at the time, and she had previously appeared in the film Modern Times, which came out a few years before, also featuring Chaplin. So this was the first time that I had watched this film, and I'd already seen 3 Charlie Chaplin films previously, so I sort of knew what to expect from Chaplin's style. But this film was very different to a lot of other Charlie Chaplin films, and although this came out in 1940, as I said, which was 13 years into the sound era of films, this was actually Chaplin's first proper sound film. And yeah, Charlie Chaplin's character actually speaks quite a few times in this film. It was a bit strange at first hearing him speak, thinking, yes, Charlie Chaplin is not in a silent movie, but he actually does very well. Now, I have to say, this film itself, it doesn't actually have that much dialogue, though there are quite a lot of scenes where the gags are quite visual, like a lot of Charlie Chaplin's previous films, and it still works extremely well. There is a few scenes when Charlie Chaplin actually dresses in his traditional tramp clothing, which became so recognisable from his previous films, but he doesn't actually play his tramp character in this film. It's really only a few scenes when he has that hat and the suit that you think, oh yeah, this is the classic Chaplin that we know. However, this film also works really well just because with Chaplin's performance in playing these two different characters, well, playing the two characters completely different, so it is really easy to separate them as two different characters. And part of what makes this film so well is Chaplin's portrayal of Hynkel. So Hynkel, obviously being this ruthless dictator, wanting to invade certain countries, but really wanting to make sure that everybody respects him and wanting to know that, everybody knows he's boss. So we get this other dictator known as Napoleone, who is meant to be a parody of Mussolini, obviously Italian. And so Napoleone and Hynkel, we have this scene where the two of them meet each other, and each of them is trying to prove to the other one that they are better and they are essentially a better leader and they are in charge. And we get some really hilarious scenes, so really funny scenes where they try and position each other higher than the other. So Hynkel makes Napoleone sit on a chair really low down, so he has to look up to him. And we get this brilliant scene in the barber shop where they're each sitting on a chair, raising the chair higher and higher until it gets completely ridiculous. But you really have to watch these scenes to get the full benefit of why this film is so funny. So this film has lots of silly slapstick gags. You get some frying pans hitting people on the head, paint thrown in people's faces, and all that silly stuff. And we do get some really funny scenes in that typical Chaplin fashion. However, there is this one scene which is right at the end of the film. It might seem like I'm spoiling it by saying this, but it's such an iconic scene that we get this monologue that Chaplin does right at the end. Obviously, as you might have expected from this type of film, with Chaplin playing two different characters that are so different, there is a case of mistaken identity when the Jewish barber character is mistaken for being Hynkel, as is done with a lot of these type of films. But yeah, it really makes sense. So we get this scene where the Jewish barber has to make a speech, but obviously everybody thinks it's being Hynkel, and he does this excellent monologue speech about totalitarianism and fascism, and it has become such an iconic speech that I'm sure you can probably watch it online somewhere if you just want to watch a speech. But it's gone down as one of the best speeches in history, not just in film history. A very memorable speech. I highly recommend that you check it out. Really powerful and emotional speech. Really highlighted what was going on in the world at the time. It could be said that this film is quite controversial. It could be said it makes light of what was happening in World War II. As I said, this film came out in 1940, which was really before the true horrors of the Holocaust were known. And Chaplin actually later said that if he had known, a few years later, the true horrors of the Holocaust and what actually went on during World War II, he wouldn't have made this film. But having said that, I still think it's a terrific film, and I think really the ending scene is absolutely brilliant. So I am very glad that this film got made, as it is. It's an excellent comedy, it's an excellent satire, and it's also a terrific social commentary. So I highly recommend The Great Dictator. So I'm going to give it a rating of 9 out of 10. If you enjoy other Chaplin's comedy films, you will definitely enjoy this. However, this one has something a bit more. As you can probably expect, it's a lot more socially relevant, so it depends if you like that kind of thing. If you're not into that kind of film, then yeah, you might not enjoy this quite as much as Chaplin's other ones, but still, it's a very iconic film, and yes, I think definitely worth watching. So there we go. So that is my review of The Great Dictator. So what do you guys think? Have you seen The Great Dictator? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Please let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.